Hi everybody! Thanks for viewing this video and hopping on to YouTube. Welcome to my very first one. It's a big day. So I wanted to take just a couple of minutes on this premiere video to talk about my anticipation for the future, what I look forward to, what my goals are with this channel, and just do a real brief introduction before future videos where I do a deep dive into my past. So as the name of the channel suggests, I am dedicating this to ex-Jehovah's Witness activism, as well as advocacy for fellow survivors of various abuses within the Jehovah's Witness organization. My real goal and hope is that I can lend an ear as well as a voice to other people who have suffered and endured some of the things that I did, who were victimized while in the organization, and who really, their cases were mishandled or not handled at all. Just wanted to, give the world a little bit of an insider perspective on what it's like to be a woman in the organization. And at that, a survivor of both childhood sexual abuse and domestic violence as an adult by a spouse. I feel like the irony is, growing up, we had this songbook that we sang from. It was the Brown songbook. And there was a song in it called "The Women Are a Large Army." And it was all about how women are so important because they're the bulk of the people going out and doing the preaching work, the door-to-door, which pre-pandemic, that is true. It was mostly women who were going out door to door because they had the time, because by and large it was the husbands that were working. I want to use that song, use that phrase, and flip the script on them, because more and more women are leaving and have left the organization, and we are using our voices and forming a large army to share what atrocities have been committed in that organization, as well as hope for the future, a bright outlook, and how real happiness is on this side of things. I feel like we need more women's voices in this activism role. We have a lot to contribute, but it's very difficult for us because we were so brainwashed to believe that our voices didn't matter and we did not have an important role in society. And I want to take that power back, and I'm here to hopefully help encourage other women to do the same, as well as give some insight to maybe mates of people who were once or maybe still are witnesses, so you understand the struggles of being in a cult like that and the baggage that kind of comes with it. So yeah, that's kind of my big outlook, hope for the future. I am currently also working on a book by the same name, and we are working, myself and a friend, on a podcast soon. So as soon as that hits the airwaves, I will tell you where to tune in. The reason for the name of the account, A is for apostate, is because when I left the organization, I didn't know until recently that apostate just actually means someone who leaves their religion. Like, that's it. Just, I no longer want to be a whatever. That's important because growing up, when you are a witness, there are kind of two ways that you leave the witnesses. You're either disfellowshipped or disassociated. So if you're disfellowshipped, generally that means that you've have some sin that you've done, some mistake that you've made, and you're not quite repentant enough, and so they're like, you can't continue to be a witness. That's a disciplinary act that they take against you. Sometimes people don't want to be disfellowshipped, but the congregation they're in is just like, nah, nah. Which that's actually what happened to me the first time. We'll talk about that more later. Being disassociated is when you sit down and you take pen to paper and you tell them, I do not want to be a Jehovah's Witness anymore. That is considered to be like real bad. And that's just this side of being an apostate. So both of those things, whether you're disfellowshipped or disassociated, incur the same punishment. You're kicked out of the organization, which means you cannot have any contact or any conversation at all with any friends or family or anyone that's still an active Jehovah's Witness. If you still live in the same house as someone who's disassociated or disfellowshipped, so it's your family member, you can still, of course, talk to them because you are sharing a house, but you have to be real careful about what that conversation is. You can't talk about anything related to spiritual activity. So kind of the third level or tier to that is apostasy. Now, the witnesses teach that an apostate is not really someone who is disfellowshipped or disassociated. That's someone who had been either of those things, right? Had been kicked out or left the organization. But then they're out spreading all these terrible lies about the witnesses. They're picketing angrily in front of meetings and conventions, and they're just spreading all these lies, and they're vicious and trying to get other people to not be witnesses. So apostates are like the worst of the worst. The governing body, who are the head of the Jehovah's Witnesses, they're the ones who make the rules and everything, 8 guys up in New York, they have been proud about being on camera talking about how God himself will kill apostates directly very soon in Armageddon. They look forward to that. And so there was this fear of apostates my whole life. And then I leave and I start listening to some apostates. And I can tell you that every apostate I've ever met, listened to, read, have not said one lie about Jehovah's organization. Not once. Now, there are some that are very forthright in their way they proclaim that the organization harms people. There are some that are angry because they've been hurt so badly by that cult. But no one is telling any lies. All they're doing is they're sharing the facts about how the organization works and things that have happened to them while one of Jehovah's Witnesses. So I realized that actually being an apostate is a good thing. We are simply taking a stand and telling things the way that they are. The funny thing is, the witnesses refer to their religion as the truth, but apostates are the ones that all we're doing is telling the truth about the truth. We're just pulling back the curtain and allowing people to understand the way the organization works, what happens when you're victimized, what happens when you're kicked out, and if that makes me an apostate for being honest and transparent, so be it. So here I am, embracing that name. Very excited for the things to come and the things that I will talk about. As I touched on earlier, I have quite a layered and varied experience. I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness. I was one of 7 kids. We lived in the city and went to a congregation in the city. When I was young, we left the city and we moved to the country, kind of to the middle of nowhere. And we went to a very small congregation that was extremely nepotistic. And I mean, everyone in that hall was related to each other. And I don't mean like distantly. It had been like 2 sets of, grandparents that had founded this congregation. And then from there, like built this congregation out of generations of offspring. So everyone in the hall were like physical brothers and sisters, aunts, uncles, first cousins, grandparents. And I think my family was one of 2, maybe 3 families that were not blood related to all these people. So it was like this weird like cult within a cult. It was very, very, very weird. And at the time, you don't think it's that weird, but looking back on it, it's like a little bizarre, to be honest. So it was even more strange because just before we moved, so my mom was a very zealous Uber witness. My dad converted to become a witness not long after they were married. And then in the late 60s, early 70s, I don't remember the exact date, the witnesses completely banned cigarette smoking. So before that, it was kind of frowned upon. Like they didn't really suggest or like if you smoked, but you still could and still be a witness. But then they were just like, nope, no more cigarettes. That's it. If you do smoke, you're going to be disfellowshipped. Well, my dad was a cigarette smoker and a witness, and he couldn't really give up the habit, or he didn't want to. So it was easier for him to hide it by leaving or stop working in the area and start working as a long haul semi driver. So he just wasn't home very much. And so he was able to kind of keep that hidden for a long, long time. So because my dad was not around too much, my mom kind of had to pick up the slack. So she was like, the stay-at-home mom, cooking, cleaning, all that stuff, raising 7 kids. But then she also had to kind of be the spiritual head of the family, take the lead, because my dad just wasn't there. And so we were in this congregation that was like all these people were related, very traditional families, right? Like husband, wife, husband worked, was home every night for dinner, etc. And then you have us come in, like a bunch of kids from the city. My dad's only around some of the time. And so we were just like really kind of outcasts. We were extremely zealous. We were at all the meetings early, stayed late, field service all the time. But we just still we weren't really like held in high esteem. So that was a really weird like start to my life as a witness. I just never felt like I belonged. And then on top of it, when I was in 1st grade, my teacher wanted to move me to the 3rd grade because I tested very well in school. And my mom did not want to have anything to do with that because I was really tall for my age. And she did not want to put the pressure on me. This is where it gets really funny. She did not want to put pressure on me to be older than, or feel like I was older than what I actually was. She wanted me to be a kid. I'll talk about why that's funny later. So she convinced my dad to let him homeschool me. I was the last of my siblings, and none of my siblings had been homeschooled. As a matter of fact, the elders they counseled my mom against homeschooling me because this was like early 80s, and they thought it would reflect poorly on the organization because they didn't want it to look like I was being kept away as part of the religious training. They thought it would look bad for the witnesses. So much so that, and they didn't want me to lose my territory, which means they wanted me to be in public school so I could witness to the other kids, and help indoctrinate other young people. So it was so intense. My mom wrote a letter to Bethel, which is the headquarters of the Jehovah's Witnesses in New York. I'm sure she thought she was writing to the governing body themselves, and I'm pretty sure it was just some dude in a back room reading letters and just typing up whatever response. So she sends this letter to them, explains the whole thing, and they write her back and basically are like, they don't have any reference material for this. It's brand new. Homeschooling was not really a thing, but we're leaving it to the discretion of the parent, blah, blah, blah. So my mom took the letter to the elders and was like, Bethel said, New York said, I can do what I want. So she convinced my dad because my dad was big into education, and so she convinced him to let me be homeschooled. So I was the first witness in our area ever to be homeschooled. And it was I don't know, a year later was the first article in an Awake that came out about being homeschooled. And it was just that. It was it's up to the parents kind of thing. So here I am, the only young person homeschooled in a family with basically a part-time dad, going to a congregation where everyone is related to everybody. And I was weirdly tall for my age. I mean, by the time I was 11, I was 5'7". So I just it was a very awkward childhood. That's the tip of the iceberg. And then it ended up being that by the time I was in late middle school, just going into high school is when other witnesses started homeschooling. And now I guess it's a thing. Witnesses, I've heard basically everybody or lots of people keep their kids home from school. Oh, which is bizarre, but I feel bad because I kind of feel like my mom set a trend that I wish hadn't been set. I will say, though, that my mom, and partially just because my dad was so avid about education, I was actually homeschooled. I did not just stay home from school. So I did have to get tested every year, and I had, 3 hours every day during the week dedicated to my schoolwork. So that was good. Science is weird. It's it didn't matter if I was in public school or homeschooled. I still would have been misled about science. So I feel I was gypped in the science department. But I love science now. I just had to learn it later in life, like so many Ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. But other than that, that was, an interesting upbringing to be the only witness child being homeschooled. And because of that, I was able to get baptized at the ripe old age of 11, start regular pioneering at the age of 12, 90 hours a month, going door to door, preaching to people with my mom. So my mom and one of my sisters and I all started pioneering together at the same time. I was in pioneer school at age 13. Stephen Lett was one of my instructors. He is not as animated in real life in small groups as he is now as part of the governing body. He's gotten weird face reactions now, but I mean, he was always a little animated, but nothing like that over the top stuff that he does now. So I was 13. When I was 14, my dad was disfellowshipped. I'm going to do a whole video about that process later. When I was 18, I moved back to the city that we had lived in by myself. I had started working. I was working full time, but I was still pioneering. By the time I was 20, I had started like realizing there's a whole world out there. I was extremely naive, so I got into some sticky situations. Ended up being disfellowshipped when I was 20 because I was 20, alone in a city, like meeting people and, parties and all that stuff. I didn't want to get disfellowshipped, but I did. My mom passed away when I was 21. I'll do a video about all that. I was reinstated when I was 26. Got married to someone who was also raised as a witness. We were both witnesses then. And he had grown up with my family. And I was married for about 7 years. And he was extremely awful. He was an abusive alcoholic. I will talk more about that experience as well. And divorced at 34 and thus disfellowshipped a second time. Thankfully, I continued to live in sin when I was disfellowshipped, and it gave me enough time to fully wake up mentally, and I've been awake mentally for about 5 years. Part of my story too is just about my abuse as a child, which I'll talk about with lots of trigger warnings later. And, you can get to know me a little bit more that way. But I really just want to stress that I hope my channel brings some education, but also some hope and positivity that there's life after the cult. It's a happy, fulfilled life. And do not be afraid to stand up for yourself, to shine a light on the darkness within that organization. And I currently, unfortunately, my family does still shun me. It's really hard. Like, I miss my sisters a lot. But through therapy and education, I've learned that they're the ones making a choice over a religion. And I have to make peace with that and know that my door is always open to them, and hopefully one day they will come walking through it. So if they're watching, I hope they know I love them a lot, and I am always going to be here for them as people and human beings, and that, the world is not a scary place that's going to mistreat you and chew you up and spit you out. So that's just my brief introduction for today. Please subscribe, feel free to comment. I hope it's only nice and positive things. If not, it'll hurt my feelings, but I'll get over it. And I look forward to more content in the future, education about witnesses, and so on and so forth. But I really just wanted this first one to be a brief hello. So I look forward to reaching some of you, hopefully, and, come along with me on this journey. That's it for now. I will talk to everybody hopefully soon, and ciao for now.